With trance, you're sort of mesmerized, or you can freak out. Can trance lead to possession? For sure. You have this consolidation of almost all American songwriting, taking existing songs and changing them, incorporating types of messaging, incorporating types of psychological mechanism.
Is music part then of conditioning a group identity or a social identity?
Well, absolutely. There are people studying how the Beatles were using technologies and techniques developed by Pavlov, developed by Luria, right? Developed testing on animals and small children in the Soviet Union to create a type of mental instability. This was at friggin' MK Ultra. The Beatles turned the entire audience into one psychic organism that they controlled.
Welcome to Beyond Perception. I'm Simon, coach and your host. My guest today is Dr. Hans Utter. Hans, just a brief introduction of yours. You are a masterful musician, not only one of the most seasoned sitarists, and I had to look it up, what it actually is in present times, but also an accomplished guitarist and oud player. You transcend genres from Western and Indian classical music to jazz to the captivating modal music of Central Asia and the Middle East. You're also an ethnomusicologist, a music producer, a composer, an author, and a professor. Welcome, Hans. It's my joy.
Hey, thank you so much, Simon. It's wonderful to be here.
Likewise. And you just told me I'm the first who's pronouncing your name correctly.
Well, you know, in my whole life, it's happened so few times. It's just something I've had to accept. And so I almost can't believe it's happened. It's like a dream. Because you're both first and last name correctly pronounced, you know. And so, yeah. But we were saying that, you know, my name, you know, so I've got the full sort of German name, and actually my name has changed the course of my life at several junctures, you know. But I was fixing the lighting here before we went live, and actually this piece of wood is carved by my great grandfather Hans. So he did this. I just have it, you know, just happened to be up there in the studio. But but basically, yeah. So when I was a young, like very young child, my parents would dress me in lederhosen. It did not go over well.
Was it a rather beautiful experience, or
not necessarily beautiful? No. So
more traumatic one.
But anyways, we can fast forward.
Yeah.
So when I went to India, this professor, a very well-known professor of Sanskrit, he wrote my name in Sanskrit. Hans Utter. Hans is swan. Utter is northern. In Sanskrit. Wow. And he wrote it, and he said, don't go to Paris, go to India. And so I ended up doing that for my study abroad and ended up staying in India. I don't know how.
Yeah. So I want to briefly share to the audience the topics I have in mind for today, and then we can take it from there. So what I would love to talk with you is about how music affects and alters our perception and consciousness. And on the one side, also how this relationship is used to control people's minds, and hopefully also in this conversation discuss the consequences of this misuse and what we possibly can do to counter that. But then also I want to explore what constitutes an enriching, healthy relationship with music. And I have seen a few interviews you gave on other podcasts, and I know we could have several conversations and still only scratch the depth of your very special expertise at this. That's my understanding. Please correct me if I'm wrong. At this intersection of music and consciousness, or music and perception, and that's also what me personally intrigues. personally, but also as a coach, because that's basically my work, and my interest is exploring our perceptions and how this can, on the one hand, lead to imprison ourselves, but also really to liberate us. And before we hopefully speak about how music affects and alters our perception, I would love to know a little bit more. And you mentioned that you studied in India. How did you become interested in this relationship of music, perception, consciousness?
Well, I experienced, and I wasn't necessarily aware of that at the time. So what we call consciousness, right? So it's very important to be clear about terminology. We have different types of awareness, different types of presence, different types of resonance, right? Continuously, right? So anyways, that's the main topic. So, India, your question again was like, what drew me to this particular path? Yeah. So I played violin, something drew me to music, and I was actually, I went from doing like punk rock when I was like 14, 15, 16, whatever, to becoming like a total jazz snob. I wouldn't listen to anything else. It had to be jazz all the time. It's like, but all these junctures, my relationship, especially, say now, right? So I just, honestly, like I do concert, this, that, okay, I'm doing a show. How much does it pay? What do I have to prepare for the show? Bus is Arabic for stop. I mean, it's just, okay, I'm just here to do this as something that is become my livelihood, which I wanted this when I was younger, and it's manifested now just by itself, right? So the interrelationship of music and consciousness, I had kind of profound experiences of this, when I was very little, like a little kid. And then I went down different.
If I may ask, what kind of experiences?
Different things of say higher level states of consciousness, or different, I say embodied worlds. So sort of things, as a child is very vast, right? So it's kind of hard to come back. I mean, I can, right? But without using millions of words. So just a, interconnection, sort of, you want to say like a centering, a freeing, the dimensionalist, I don't know, freedom, right? Who you really are at essence. You get glimpses of that occasionally. Maybe not very often, but anyways, so, this, as I went, what happened was that I was, involved in, so I could have actually gone into sort of like rock. I was in my 20s, right? Early 20s, 21, whatever. I could have gone into the rock world. And I was also really into jazz, but I started experiencing some negative energies with this music. Actually at this time, like I could just play one note, the whole crowd would go crazy. I had some, I don't necessarily have that connection now. I had a connection, and I would say, like, how can you have an ego about music? It's flowing through you. You just present it. But at the same time, and whatever circumstances, I just made a radical shift because I saw that certain paths, and I just took this. I didn't know much about India. I didn't really have a particular interest in India, but I said, okay. And I decided in 1 month to do it. And man, my parents were not happy with me.
What age?
It's like and then when I lived there for 5 years, I was basically out of the whole, I was like, this guy doesn't exist anymore for us. Literally. I mean, not, obviously things are taken care of, but it was because I thought that there's something so profound about music And it was just, and one guy, one of my friends were listening to Ravi Shankar, and he said, it sounds like there's a purity of a baby crying, like something so pure. He said, you'll never reach that in your life. You'll never have that. It was a challenge. And that also influenced me to go. But, India was not exactly what I thought it would be. You know what I mean? I thought it was like this sort of mystical land. I've been on like cruises and a few like super high end, vacations with my parents. I had almost no international experience. So it was,
At what age was that?
22.
Okay.
So I would know when I would do that now. But anyways, so through these things, in experiencing this, and not really necessarily collating it, but I've had an interest, say, in my academic work, because before I started, the sort of whatever, these kind of podcasts, I had some awareness. I didn't necessarily focus it, but even in my academic work, I looked at my first book is published too. It's called Trance, Ritual, and Rhythm. So I live with this tribe in the Northwest Himalayas, which is, I went back there 2 years ago. I must have been completely nuts because these are like remote villages, and I'm going up there, no translator. I got all the, university's recording equipment, tape machine, camera, just completely, but I went back there, but this location, it's called Jansar Bower. And so it's a very, very interesting, Northwest Himalayas, many events, say in like the religious texts, like the Mahabharata took place there. But there's also all these different overlays. So what they have there is very unique, is that they have this, type of drumming it's used for possession of particular, like their gods. And then so when they go into possession, they have to do these feats, like, you dunk your head in molten metal or something like that, or lift up there's a huge boulder. I mean, I don't know if any, it's got to weigh like 5 or 6 tons. But anyway, so that I was, just living with this, the way that these rhythms, were used, and just seeing this completely different world. And they have a text called the Dol Sagar, the Ocean of Rhythm, but no one knows if it's like a text that exists like on almost like a consciousness, on a mind level, right? There's some written things, but there's I've quoted a version of it, but there's a whole world outside of even these recording and discursive mechanisms that we have, and there's sort of different portholes or dimensions. But anyways, to, return to the present. So I've had an interest in perception, just, what is perception, right? How is this, embodiment, right? So we're in these bodies. Are we these bodies? We're the bodies. We're, sight, sound, all these things, different levels of mind, and also just really kind of empirical analysis. And then Jan Irvin, who I did one show with him on my first book back in, years before. He had a guest cancel. He's like, do you want to talk about music and mind control something? And I said, let me throw something together. So I wrote that outline. I think it became like 50 episodes. I don't know why I write outlines. I think it's one show. Just keep going. But so anyways, I don't know if that answers your question, but it's, I've had just different junctures or interactions with this. And then, we can experience a lot, making it like a clear field of exploration, right?
So what I'm hearing from you, there is a relationship between, for example, rhythm, but then also perceptions, or rhythm being like portals into a different way of seeing, or a different experience,
or different energetic states. There's I think we also have to differentiate between what we call conscious experience, right? And there's also types of semi-unconscious states too. that can be like ecstasy, like people call like trance. It's going into a state, or possession. I mean, rhythm, very important for possession.
Can you just quickly define possession? What is that, and how does it differentiate to trance?
Well, I mean, in a way, trance is a type of possession, but not necessarily. Trance is a kind of hypnotic, semi-hypnotic type of space. You know, there's a lot of stuff about these types of language. What is actually hypnosis? But a trance, a trance, you're sort of mesmerized, or you can freak out like in a trance. You can dance. Can trance lead to possession? For sure. But this should be distinguished from that sort of, this is in these, like the examples I'm going to give right now, this is where the trance is built into the foundation of the culture. You know what I mean? It's not something that you go to a rock concert or you do some stupid occult ritual at home and get possessed by a demon or something. You know, it's like, no, there's specific things and there's specific signs. And then the being will leave the person that's possessed. Okay. So they're summoning like a type of a god or an archetypal energy will go into the individual. The individual will enact that and then it will leave and they'll go back to normal. They may not have much memory of that. Okay. Does that make sense?
Yeah. And what would be the purpose of that?
Well, I mean, many purposes. I mean, there's, lots of, there's a whole range, like say, for example, Voodoo, Santeria, stuff like that. So, they summon. For oracular, basically the person being possessed is sort of like, think of the Oracle of Delphi or something, right? They're a vehicle for this. So it's, that's, at least that's the understanding. So, I mean, gosh, in John Zarbauer, I mean, they had, the legal system was run on possession. So basically, the judges, right, would have to go into a type of trance and have at least a possessing spirit of this god Mahasudeta, so they could do justice. They could pronounce the case. They would use, so the possession is almost like this is very different from a lot of the possession stuff in the West, but this is like they're summoning in. So the energy, so the trance aspect is a rhythm. Now, this possession per se can also be like a type of power or energy that can be invoked or opened up in the individual, right? So,
and the distinction here is that it's not yours, but it's from another entity that you're accessing, or
yes, you're accessing for that. Yes, and sometimes for power, right? For you can look at Santeria and stuff like that. So, but there's also religious observances, also for religious observances. But literally for all kinds of different, I mean, in this region, which is amazing. I was just there, like I mentioned, it completely changed. They're very wealthy now. It's totally modernized. I almost got killed though by an entire village. That was kind of scary. This is
what was that?
That was 2022, just when I was last time I went back to this area. So I can go into that story, but basically, so the trance, you go into a trance, right? So, there's
So would you say that a trance is stepping out of your self-conscious, rational capacity to kind of think or apply your will?
Well, here's the thing. There's, I've seen one guy, I don't remember his name and I kind of don't want to, but he does this stuff on mind control, right? He does these lectures. I really felt like he had some very fundamental flaws in his discourse. So a type of a trance can also be one-pointed mental focus, right? So you're able to direct your mind to one thing, right? Hold your mind. So in a certain way, that's a trance. It's a narrowing, right, of the perception. But in this case, this is consciously induced, right? You're doing it, but you have a focus, and you're able to completely, and that's a great skill actually to have. So in that way, creative endeavor, what we call trance, a lot of this language is fuzzy, right? I mean, so, I can look at my own specificities, my own categorization, but in general parlance, right? Trance means that, you're brought into like the principle entrainment. So entrainment is I worked on this entrainment project, and just a brief definition of this, entrainment relates to the natural process where if you have two bodies, right? This was discovered, I think, in the 1600s or whatever, two clocks, they'll start ticking in phase, right? Yep. They're entraining. That temporal sequence creates a type of entrainment. And the entrainment is a type of locking, right? So you're resonating in conjunction. It affects that rhythm. I mean, so there's, and so entrainment functions at many, many different levels, but it's where, so it's at that oscillation, you go in some degree of parity with it, right? You become, this can go mental, this can be your heart rate, this can be your pulse, this can be your, different, mental states, alpha, beta, things like that. And so this is entrainment, right? So it's where you have two oscillating bodies, and they come into synchronization, but a stronger oscillating body can have a greater effect, right? And the entrainment works to go on the other side. It works all like ELF, weaponry, all this stuff. It works on entrainment, right? It entrains your brain with these frequency patterns.
So would this, what you're just describing, then also be a case of trance where you get entrained to something outside yourself?
Well, so I'll use the terms. No, I'm not saying this, I think it's very important to define words and terms. So, but in this case, I'm going to use these terms to express what I'm expressing. So I'm not saying this is the fundamental thing on trance. So, but we go to the one side is trance. So you could be entranced, right? You go to the opera, you're entranced, you're captivated, you're carried outside yourself. You're entranced by the beauty of your wife, hopefully, or girlfriend. You're not someone else, right? But but you get called, you get captivated, right? So it's a little bit
attracted.
Attracted. That's one. Well, attracted, but your consciousness has changed, right? You have an alteration of your state, right? So there's a level of trance of functioning in an unconscious way. Okay, many people live in types of trances. Sometimes, we all do, right? But not really being present in their lives with their own experience, not being able to face who and what they are, not being able to completely expand out into the...
So basically the trance is keeping everyone from recognizing who they are.
Potentially, yes, in this thing, because in trance, so the trance can also create ecstatic states, right? So, you go, but again, we want to be very specific about these. I think these should be probably, called by other terminology, but but in this sort of, let's say, look at the negative connotation of trance, is that, you may even get something of great enjoyment that it seems like to you from that, what's coming into you, right? That what you're connecting with, but it places you outside yourself. I mean, it places you potentially in a artificial, not, your energy is bound, right? You're not able to see clearly what you are. I think really like trance, you can go into a trance, like if you're overcome, say, by like a negative emotion. I have a problem with this person. You start thinking about it. You're you're going into a trance, right? You'll hallucinate, which means you'll project a situation which may occur or not occur, but you'll build up this suddenly, you know what I mean? And then you have reaction. You have loss of control, right? You know what I mean? Does that make sense? Like you can think of an example, say maybe that person didn't even do something that badly. When it's build up, so that's a type of a trance because you're not able to recognize.
So is it a distortion of my perception?
Well, it's a type of entrainment. It's limiting. So trance can also be good. It can be nice.
Okay.
You go, but so trance, again, like say NLP stuff, trance is very important. I guess maybe I'm anti-trance, partially. I'm full for really expanding your capabilities and experiential levels. And I think that you can go into these states, right? You can go into like quote unquote trance-like states, but still be present, right? Not brought into, the type of derealization. So if we want to go to the other side, you could look at trance, hypnotic, cerebral inhibition being culturally, socially enforced in many, many different levels. Okay? And so this is certainly there.
Yeah. Do we want to dive into this a little bit deeper? Because from what I know from you, research has been done to explore this connection between music and perception to control people, to intentionally put them into, would you say, a trance or hypnosis?
Hypnosis, trance. So these are, again, we can, a certain way we can almost leave that aside for now. We set that aside. So how the functioning of perception, right? Perception, the functioning. So we go back. So let's, just say like music itself, right? So the relationship of these tones, right? Of the frequencies, right? So resonance, frequencies, time, space, expression, and experience. All these go into music, right? So you're using these type of resonant frequencies. You're using rhythms. You're creating a temporal. You're almost taking control of the time stream, briefly, potentially. Essentially, that's what it is. Now, obviously, music is it's not a physical object. You can have a score, but the actual music, as it is, must be experienced in time, right? It unfolds over time, right? So these are, you have time, space, you have expression, so emotion, right? You're not reading a blueprint. You're not reading a tax document. It's expressing, but then you can also sometimes feel that. So the person expressing it, it can share or open up other types of experience in the person that's listening, right? And then, you have the basic structures of music. We go back to ancient China, of course, the Greeks and stuff. So, like Pythagoras, even other. Aristotle moved away from this a bit, but Pythagoras saw the relationships of pitches and harmony as the fundamental structure of the universe. Okay, so this was not. This was these resonant frequencies connected from all different planes, from the gross, the material, all the way up to celestial, all the way up beyond, to non-physical, higher spiritual dimensions. But this was a connecting thing. And it's also the ratios, the pure geometry, right, of pitches. How does music even work? I mean, that's all. This is like entrainment is a biological. It's sort of a universal law. Okay, it's a universal law, like anything else, right? Well, not like anything else, but it is a universal law. It's just part of nature. It's, yes, you can work with it, you can use it, you become aware of it, or you cannot. But it's something that's there, right? You know what I mean? It's so just like if you look at like gravity, if I pick something up, it's going to fall. If I'm going to throw a ball, it'll go this far. If I make a mechanical device, I can throw the ball 10 times as far, but it's still the same process. That makes sense?
Yeah.
Same thing. So all these things, so the thing is that, again, music and these relationships, because what's super interesting about just sound itself, music itself, is that you have one pitch, right? So the brain hears a single note, da, whatever it may be, right? Then you have timbre, da, 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 da. Again, this is not a demonstration of singing. I'm just showing. This is not a singing. But so that it's just an example of just, it's a sound, right? That I'm changing the envelope, the timbre, by just, going from my nose, mouth, and so we have speech also, speech, but speech is generally not, we don't consider it. You can say someone speaks musically, but speech is not music. Like we don't have these tones. So when you hear a note, a frequency, right? So that note, is, say like in Indian cosmology, the note considered, it has all these different dimensions. It's something that it exists in potentiality, right? This is part of the fabric of the universe and the connection with the universe. So you can bring it, and they have different sides, up, down, and all the really great artists, they approach it as a type of, it's an exploration. It's almost like a worship. It's going into this vast field. When you go surfing, you don't control the ocean, right? I mean, you control your deployment, what you're doing, but you're going to the ocean, right? So the music is the ocean, the Sursaga, right? So anyways, all these components, again, just to summarize, going back to ancient Greek, seeing, these relationships of music, then we move forward to Plato. So this one is the scientific, right, resonance frequency model. Anyway, sorry, back what I was saying before is one note has all these other notes. These are called the harmonic spectra. So the timbre you hear, the type of a voice, a harp, a violin, an oboe, it's these different overtone sequences, right? So only the sine wave, right? Which a sine wave is just a single pure tone. It's all these stacking of these different harmonics. Our brain makes us think we hear a single note. We're actually hearing all these harmonics with that note. Okay. And so this principle was used
our perception tells us there's just one tone being played, but actually there's a multitude.
And so this was used, in the Baroque era, right? So they had organs. So they were not able to construct pipes, right? To get to these super low bass frequencies, right? So super low bass frequencies. They had a method, which is actually, I'm sure there's some, maybe even in Germany or whatever, some of these old church organs. That's something to check out. Amazing science behind that, where you would play a series of harmonics and the brain would hear the super low bass note, even though that note was not being played. It was just that there was enough of the whatever configuration of the harmonics, the brain heard the low note. Okay. Mm-hmm. This also, if you're familiar with HemiSync, you heard of that?
That doesn't say anything to me.
So HemiSync is a technology developed out of, you heard of the Monroe Institute?
Yeah, but...
So Monroe.
Please give a little bit of context. Yeah.
So it's actually an interesting place. I've been out there a number of occasions. It's up in the mountains of Virginia, but it was used. There's a film called Men Who Stare at Goats, and so in that movie they talk about some of the projects that were conducted at the Monroe Institute. But basically, the Monroe Institute, they have the HemiSync is a way to get extremely low frequencies that operate on the physical brain, okay, to go into different states of consciousness. It was used primarily for the remote viewing. I think it's still being done. And one of the guys is still out there. He's kind of he's definitely out there. He's done a lot of remote viewing, but but anyways.
So let me just understand it. So HemiSync is binaural beats.
It's binaural beats, exactly.
Through the binaural beats, that enables remote viewing?
Well, there's a whole process, right?
Okay.
And so it's not, put on the headphones and you're flying. But, there's a whole process of, going, and they have courses on it. They have, it was done extensively. It was, okay, in terms of, whether or not they actually did the remote viewing work, did they, I'm not going to make a claim on either side on that, because I haven't researched it that much to see, is this remote viewing? Is this just fake? But anyways, but it's a whole, so there's different, binaural beats. So they work on the same principle, right? Of where it's called dichotic hearing. You have your left ear, your right ear. You play two frequencies very close together. You want to get this very low frequency. So, these are inaudible tones.
Which is the discrepancy, no? Between the two tones.
Exactly.
Yes.
And then it entrains your brain with that discrepancy, that ELF frequency. Because these, there's all different, you can look at everything as a spectra, right? Light, sound, color, everything. These are all spectras. It's like a rainbow of these different frequencies. And so even, of course, color is color and sound are very closely related in a certain way, but they're just different, you say different octaves, right? So we get into that. But anyways, so that's how the HemiSync works. And, you can get like stress reduction, or you can get the full, 50 CD course and go into training sessions. And I think they also add like, biofeedback or whatever too, but you're able to go into these trance states and go into an astral, non-physical body and then be, this and that. Anyways, so I don't necessarily, part of though, in this case, it is a type of a trance, right? In a sense, because your whole you're leaving your physical body, at least maybe just in your imagination, but obviously since the United States government invested, lots of money into it, there must have been, one would assume there's something there, right? Otherwise, why do it, right? You just got a satellite, so anyway, so this is an example of where the brain is creating a frequency that does not exist. Okay. I mentioned the church organ and then, these things. And so anyways, the ELF, so our brain operates on these extremely low frequencies. So they're far below the threshold of auditory perception, right? Our physical ears cannot hear them. They can be broadcast, but it takes a lot, right? So we're talking about, you just can't do it, right? You can do phase cancellation stuff to mimic it, but to actually broadcast like a 5 hertz, 7 hertz, very low frequency, you need a huge, advanced technology. It can be done, but it's not, it's not something that's in the range. It's more governmental or, high level corporate level, right, to do that. But these can be induced. So there's another phenomena, right, of how, like if you look at a fence, there could be missing fence posts, but your brain will fuse together. So you see a continuous thing. So there's a lot of our perception. Some of it is done. It basically is a stream. Ideally it just streamlines, right? It streamlines your consciousness. So you don't have to think about everything all the time. Things can be just done automatically, which is good, right? You're driving a car, how many things we do. But the flip side is that then you have, perceptions that don't really exist. But, I'm distinguishing this from a hallucination. It's an optical illusion, but it's a construction. Your brain is constructing this. Go ahead.
Yeah. So I was just thinking, I guess it depends a little bit on the intention or the purpose of this optical illusion. That could be enhancing, enriching. It could also be limiting or maybe be disempowering. And I just would like to maybe connect a little bit to the conversations you had with Jan, and maybe just share a little bit about your discoveries or research in regards to how this link between music frequencies and perception is used to limit people or to maybe influence this perception in a way that is disempowering. What?
Okay, well, going back to the Greeks, again, Plato, a lot in his Republic and other writings of how music, it's very important what music, especially the youth hear, right? It is the effect of music as having substantial consequences, including even being a harbinger, even a causal factor in the collapse of the social order. So Plato talked about this very clearly, in lots and lots of detail. Certain types of melodies or rhythmic modes, he believed, had a negative effect on the youth because they were unable to regulate their emotions, right? They're unable to sort of, go to a sort of a higher, level of functioning. Because it's like, he said it affects their nerves, their nervous system. We would say our glandular system, right? Adrenal glands, things like that. I mean, a lot of the maladies people have are because of glandular, the adrenal system, the endocrinal system, things like that are also very, very important. But so in ancient China, it said every time a new sort of dynasty or new emperor came in, they would change the tuning and change the music of the whole country, because the connection of music with the political order, with the social order. So having this kind of dynamic effect and being something that, so both Plato, right, and ancient Chinese, so we're looking at, you could say like a top-down type of control that was sort of seen as a necessity to preserve the society, but also to make sure that people can unfold fully as who they are, at least within that, the ideals of that particular society.
So is music part then of developing or conditioning a group identity or a social identity?
Well, absolutely. I mean, that's one function, So this is more sort of the cosmic, going back to the importance of music to social order, right? So this is ancient. We have different, we go through time, but it's long been seen that the music of a particular group, like in the resistance against the British, say like Irish music and stuff, was very, very important, right? So music, there again, we have different. We're using a very broad brush here, but say like some type of folk music or where people get together. These songs embody culture. People, you're literally connecting, right? You're resonating with other people and you're connecting with the past, with the future, the current generation, so that was some of the function, like some of these Russian folk music actually had very powerful psychological, you could say intersubjective effects, right? And could use for very powerful types of healing of very serious diseases and stuff. So some of this, like Russian choir, with some of the sounds, they have a lot of these very close intervals. So, you know what I mean? These very intense, you're bringing two notes very close together. The closer the notes to get together, there's more of a called beats, or like sort of a tension, or almost not necessarily a violence, but but an energy. It's like you're bringing together these two forces. So, anyways, so if you look at, but the one thing that's interesting to me is you see we have different fads, we have different things, we have types of social degradation. I mean, look at the Roman Empire, right? That was an example of absolute social societal decay, right? And Plato would have said one of the founding parts of this is your music, but he's connecting that with this whole order, right? The man itself, the psychological, biological, educational, political, economic, as integrated, right? But saying this has profound effect beyond what it seems like. It just seems like just some song. This can change the social order. But Rome, complete, turned into this, all the Colosseums, et cetera, right? But that wasn't imposed on them, right? This happened. You see a really dramatic shift of what were particular movements. Primarily, this is related specifically to, I say, Western European American societies, that there were junctures in time where we kind of split off into sort of these, you could say, I'm using this metaphorically, but almost like a parallel timeline from what was happening. Look at all the amazing, discoveries, the stuff that was happening around the turn of the 18th century, 19th century, right? You see this, and then you have all, well, of course, we can go World War I, World War II, many traumatic events, but also really fracturing of things that had been in place of social order, relationship between parents and children, responsibility of parents to children, right? And we're not talking like on, yes, there's always going to be bad parents, right? There's always going to be this and that, but seeing it like epidemic being promoted, right?
And you connect this to a change in music?
It is connected. I'm not going to say that this is the primal cause, but if you look at this resonance thing and you realize that also that we exist as pure. We are types of resonance. Okay. We are types of resonance, balance, imbalance, order, disorder. But fundamentally, we are living, vibrating, energetic systems, so in a sense, all the organs of our body are like different, it's like we live in our amazing bodies are, it's amazing, right? Isn't it amazing? We're a human being. Like, look at this. I didn't make this. Bill Gates can't do better. I don't think.
It's a miracle, yeah.
Well, I have the best body. I have the better. And I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about this is all resonance, all frequency, all interconnection, right? And so this is a different, okay. Now am I going to say empirically? No, but maybe on a level, it was an important corollary to these changes because it presaged these changes. Okay.
And then pardon. I just wanted to ask your opinion. Is it possible to point out a direction? So there was a change in internally that reflected in the music, or the music changed that reflected in a degrading of the society?
Well, what we see, as I mentioned, the Roman Empire as a counterexample. We're talking about something that is being promoted and enforced, something that is that's not coming up from the ground, so to speak, right? Certain things are being pushed, that wouldn't necessarily, even things that have been very unpopular become, so, you can go back, there's, various types of research. You can look, say, well, like Wagner, you start seeing some of these romantic composers, Scriabin or whatever, seeing this tremendous power, right, of music, right? And so you have to say the orchestral music is sort of like a culmination of, Western civilization, right? Now, there's always been folk music, right? Music, the folk or sort of quote unquote popular music, but we didn't really have this kind of popular music industry. Because of the just diversity of different communities, even just, within a single, in a single state in Germany, you can have villages with different types of, there could be some shared things, but some things may prefer this or prefer that, right? They may, what I'm saying? Like, so, you could look at so what you have this idea, we look at Alan Lomax, who did very super interesting research, but he looked at all these different societal configurations from like even cannibalistic headhunters to some type of rural agrarian. He has a whole system of correlating all these social, economic, psychological factors with the specific elements of the music they have in that culture. So and there was, other sides to it. So you look at, say, like the jazz age, right? So I played jazz, but how did this become popular, right? You have these radical shifts in the music, right? So jazz.
So jazz was in the 20s, right?
Yep. Yeah. But jazz in a certain way. So, I don't want to like sort of go un-PC. Okay. I'll stay. Well, I'm saying within the reservation, right? Nothing too far out. But certain types of rhythms that became imported into American popular music were connected to Santeria, to Voodoo, to specific types.
Could you just say what is Santeria?
So Santeria is it's basically a form of the Yoruba cult, which is based on lots and lots of possession, lots of different deities that we find in Haiti as Voodoo, and we have in Cuba and South America as Santeria. So, but these are actually the ancestor is the Yoruba thing. But this relates to there's all kinds of different things and fetishes and magic and possession and this and that. A lot of times the possession is used for power, right, or to predict the future, or to summon the entity to perform this work, to do that. And so this this is the other side of energies, right? We can access, and so depending, maybe some are better not to access. But anyways, some of these rhythms they're almost synonymous. They started becoming part of the popular music culture. Okay, so jazz in itself.
Would you say that is a reason that music became popular?
Well, things were encouraged and promoted at specific junctures. So you can look at some of the reaction to jazz at the early jazz. We're talking about, what do we call Dixieland jazz, right? To it at the time, because, jazz means what? Sex, right? It was associated with brothels, red light area. This is the red light district, Storyville, whatever, But you have this whole also cultural transformation being promoted. You have the, thing of like Great Gatsby, right? F. Scott Fitzgerald. You have, and then you have prohibition. So suddenly alcohol is illegal. Everyone's drinking. You have this type of frenetic kind of, you look at very ordered types of dancing, right? I'm not saying one thing is better than another, but you look at the way that, say, a formal dance, right? We'll probably never experience that, but like used to be, you'd go even almost whatever level of society, you'd go to a type of formal dance to meet the opposite sex as a young person. But these dances, very formal rules, specific types of music, waltz, this, that, you know what I mean? So this is, and you look at jazz, the early jazz, the dancing, like, the thing of the flappers with the crazy hats and freaking out like that. Women smoking, lots of consumption of alcohol. And then the free love was also being promoted along with that. That free love thing didn't catch on, but you can see the jazz age as almost a precursor to the 1950s, 1960s, 1970s, right? It was just a trial run. I'm not, again, I'm not, I'll just keep going. So,
yeah, just when you say trial run, who did the trial run?
Well, there's, so then we're getting, you're looking at like, there's a lot of these things are aggregate, okay? Aggregate, or you can look at sort of like a network. There's different types of power, right? Or different types of deployment. There's different types of, you could say, energetic things that happen on an energetic level that manifest in the social, right? So these are inputs. To go through precisely, I mean, I don't, I don't know if you, and to one summary thing, you have modes of distribution, production, consumption, promotion. Okay. So these are networks. These are physical networks, right? So these are being activated to promote, to make available, to, to put in the public eye, to write about it, to create a buzz, on the street, whatever. Yes, these things can happen naturally too, right? Things can by themselves take off and, create this sort of social effect. So, but there's the thing is that there's that involved. If you look at it, there's, it's a combination, I'd say, of, really, you say 1890s from types of, Darwinist, Erasmus Darwin type of eugenics, or ideas of mechanistic social control, going back to like Sir Francis Bacon, to, you could say anarchists, some of the anarchist, communist, socialist elements also being, imbibed with that. But what we see is sort of a, not every, how do you say, not everybody even knows what they're doing. They may think they're doing a great thing, right? A lot of people are just caught unaware of the cultural moment they're a part of, or else, you know what I mean? Or else they're doing their job. They're doing their function. So they're, you know what I mean? But you have, consolidation, Tin Pan Alley. You have this consolidation of almost all American songwriting. And these lyrics were being changed. This is starting about 1910, 1915. So you have, this, huge, publishers, right? So publishers of sheet music. This was, even pre-recording industry. This being consolidated, taking existing songs and changing them, incorporating types of messaging, incorporating types of psychological mechanism.
So, like, who was doing that? So there was intentional efforts to change or influence the music at that time.
Well, I'm giving sort of an acausal. I'm saying these things happened.
Okay.
But they were understood and they were studied and they were employed. So we can go on. So what I want to say is you have certain types. Now, a counterexample is like the whole big band era, right? Before World War II and this and that, this was the United States. This was a very cohesive type of community spirit, right?
That was the 30s, right?
Yeah, 30s into the 40s, 50s. So that was coming from that input, right? You have sort of this jazz being input into the culture, and then you have anyways, etc. So, we could look at very specific research on this. Going back to Gordon Allport in the 1920s, going back much further than that. Even to there was a lot of scientific stuff done, even neuroscience done in the 19th century. People aren't aware of that, right? So there was a lot known about the brain at that time. But basically, you have a lot of this study. You have a guy named Helmholtz, German, good. So Helmholtz, really started understanding this, what I talked about, the overtones, even though the Greeks had it's called a monochord, just a single string, and you can find the harmonics, but Helmholtz and Hertz, also we have the Hertz frequency cycles, really studying this phenomena, with different types of apparatus and just, seeing all these different, complexities that were not, they weren't accessible before, right? Understanding exactly 440, 441, the exact frequencies, how they work as, cycles per second, real scientific understanding. You have Lacan, and you have some, other, implications of the, psychology, right? So the inner mirror, very important, right? Inner mirror is how popular music started to work starting from the 1930s, and it's based on, specific types of research, okay, into perception and consciousness. And, you look at, Anna Freud, you look at, Edward Bernays, of course, probably familiar, like how he got women to smoke, freedom torches. He hired these models to walk down the street smoking torches of freedom. Cigarette smoking in America went up from 0 to exponential almost overnight, because women, before just never smoked. But the torches of freedom. But this is the same, similar.
Can you just elaborate a little bit about this mirror?
Yeah. So the inner mirror. Look, if you're familiar with Lacan, you've heard of it. Lacan. So Lacan is sort of a more esoteric. He's a disciple of Freud, okay, or was, but he created a very. He made some very important discoveries, right? And his writing is very, very difficult, right? It's almost like you have to be initiated to understand it. But the inner mirror is a normal psychological phase that when you're just like an infant, a toddler, whatever, you literally see yourself, say, as your parent, right? That inner mirror is a reflection in the mind. It's sort of like a psychic mirror. So your parent is there, and then you're almost like you are their, you see yourself as them almost in this reflection, because you have that connection, right? You haven't necessarily also established a separate identity, right? But the inner mirror, it becomes more like an idealized self. So you have an inner mirror, you see yourself in, ideally, right? You have a good mother, father, healthy family. You see this as what your potential is to be, I'll be like my dad, but it's just experiential, right? It just starts pre-verbally. And then ideally this inner mirror phase is finished, and you're integrated, right? So you're integrated, and then, I think we can all see this, many, depending on people's upbringing, sometimes they don't have a type of grounding in their life. They don't have a direction. And even being angry and blaming, parents for this, that, the actual cause is something they've not been able to fully, become themselves in a certain way. But anyways, the inner mirror, though, part of that, you can see this in rites of passage, quote unquote, but a lot of things, like you look at, 12 years old, you're out there working, you're this, that. So there were, methods, or, what I mean, of this thing. But then what you have is the prolongation. You have this lack, this structure. Now you're not mirroring your mom and dad. You're not a toddler. You're not 3 years old, but this structure is still in place. So this was researched at the Princeton Radio Project, taking Lacan's theory. Theodore Adorno saw that when the pop song, someone hears a song, the inner mirror, they become who the song is talking about in their inner mirror. They become that in their mind. One can become that because it's a structure that's still there. As you get older and older, it's like a remnant, right? It's like it's like something that should have been shed. Does that make sense? And so this was used, they went through this, they studied this very, very specifically. And so part of that, way, I'm not saying that this was done deliberately. Again, we could say this was social, cultural things, but of course you have loss of lots of fathers in the world wars. That's one thing. You have also, you have this invention. There wasn't a teenager. Teenagers didn't exist. The teenager was invented. It was a category that was, of course, yes, you could say that, people have always, there was like a gap in time. Like there's no teenage. You're 10, then you're 20. No, but it wasn't seen. You're an adult. It wasn't a particular phase. But so the more that these, these stages were sort of pulled apart and set out, and then they're able to market to that. You know what I mean? So this also reinforces this lack of integration, right? You know what I mean? It's a type of integration, but it's also a type of, assuming fullness of yourself, right? You know what I mean? And so, but anyways, one last thing on this, the inner mirror phenomena was very, again, understood as how this works for social movements, music. It was researched with, like, say, FDR, where the radio took the place of the father at the head of the table, and how FDR, they studied this in depth, how people.
What's FDR?
Franklin Delano Roosevelt, the president.
Okay.
Yeah. The guy who was, in the wheelchair. The only thing we have to be afraid of is fear itself. But that's a really bad. That's like the Boris Karloff version of FDR. You can delete that. Anyways, he would have these fireside chats, like sometimes twice a week, 7 p.m. Whole family would listen to the radio. These are when they had these giant radios. You know what I mean? Like the big, back in the 1920s, whatever, 1930s. So that he would address the whole nation. And this was really studied, right? And so that, part of this quote unquote inner mirror phenomena is a substitution of illusion for reality, right? Mm-hmm. And it also becomes an acceptance of the illusion, a preference of illusion over reality.
Or also the substitute of your of an external authority for your parents, huh?
Yeah, absolutely. You got it, 100%. But a lot of times the phenomena really works. I believe it's still. I think it's even more now than than it was. But you can see this in social media, right? But one of the ways, self-esteem. That's something like, what is self-esteem? This is it's a hyphen. We have to look at language, right? We take these words as like block concepts, like this is red. This is a cell phone. No, self-esteem is not an object. Self-esteem is the social replication of this inner mirror concept being indoctrinated into children. Because I went through this when I was a little kid. I went through this type of, wacky stuff. So I'll just give you an example of the inner mirror, which is literally like, so we used to, I think I was in like first, second grade, but this went on for a couple months. So we took a piece of yarn, right? A paper plate, and then you tie it, you wear it like a medallion, right? The paper plate, and you write on the paper plate, I lack. I am loving and capable. But it's literally, you write, I like. Anytime someone comes up, hey Hans, I don't like your lederhosen. Whoop, they tear apart off my plate. So anytime someone doesn't like me, or someone says, or if someone like hurt my feelings, that I'm supposed to tear apart off my own plate. And so you go to the end of the day, and if you go in like your paper plate, your eyelac, there's just like nothing there. So people, nobody, but literally like, so this is what self-esteem is. Think about that as a conditioning. So I lack. I need to see my own value in others. I need to, so self-esteem, which was, everyone says, oh, he has good self-esteem, high self-esteem. To me, I won't swear, F self-esteem. Why? Because it is a false concept. Why? Because self-esteem means how you think of yourself based on how you imagine other people see you. So my self-worth is based on what I imagine. Like, so say Simon, I'm like, does Simon like me? I think he likes me. Oh, I'm a good person. Oh, Simon doesn't like me. Oh my God, I'm a bad. That's what self-esteem is. So so you see these, and then what's that? But who's the I? That's, you know what I mean? So this is the inner mirror, at least in the Lacanian sense. We could go, there's inner mirror, inner heart mirror, there's spiritual levels, there's levels of higher consciousness that you also have an inner mirror, but very different than this. But one last thing I'll just say on this concept is it's very easy to become very selfish, right? Or very just totally ego driven, or totally focused on, you know what I mean? Like you have no connection to you don't care about anything or anybody around you except for what you're doing, right? Or this egotism, like the star, celebrity culture. This is great example. That also was rolled out at the same time. The star. Who's that? Just some dude. Okay, it's great, but you're identifying with an image. You may, You may see this or that. I mean, how many people in their own minds, they think they're like some king and they're a complete, moron with, whatever. You know what I'm saying? But it really it ties into people complaining. They say the United States, the Karen, this and that. I've seen many examples of this where, people they're waiting in line. Something doesn't go exactly right. They go berserk. They start screaming and yelling. They make this huge scene. I need this. This is not right. I mean, you probably have seen that, but, that was probably a long rant on the topic. I wasn't planning on talking about it, but cool.
Yeah. Okay. So what I'm understanding is there's this lack of validation. We don't go through infancy in a healthy way, and so then we end up seeking compensation. Would you say that's what it is? By doing things and making up for that perceived lack that we are or have in us?
Yeah, but I think fundamentally to understand it, it's also a psychic. It is a psychic threshold that must be at some point. You got to go past it, or you're never going to go beyond it, right? So it has, to me, it definitely has sort of a psychological aspect for sure. That's pre-conscious, right? I think that, but it also allows to be like a perpetual child, right?
Yeah.
It allows you to always evade responsibility. But the main thing is there's a huge industry developed. At a certain point, you have to be completely here here I am, right? This is what I am. You got to open to yourself and you got to open to the world around you. You know what I mean? It's nothing even fancy. It's right? Because of this sort of psychic wound that's pushed, because it's a wonderful trigger point. Look at consumerism. You lack this, go buy this. You need this, go buy that. You lack this, which makes it, go ahead.
And how is that connected to music or music trends? And how do music trends perpetuate that or even enforce that? Well,
so, we have to differentiate between things that are done to generate actual harm, things that are done to promote certain types of behavior. Okay. Certain, is it say like James Dean, like everyone, James Dean, great actor, right? So he would drive at 200 miles an hour. He was actually kind of a maniac, right? He was almost, had a crazy death wish or whatever. Is that a type of behavior, like extreme risk taking that's also endangering others? Is that something that should be promoted? Now, is there a thrill from doing that? Oh yeah, there's a thrill, but you know what I mean? Without a ground, these types of stimulation, like, dopamine, these type, you know what I mean? Because you don't, in a sense, you're leading further and further away from yourself. I think, each of us has we could maybe go into some of what you do. I don't know much about what you do, but I mean, there's a journey, but part of, one of the things, again, this type of responsibility or types of things that I leave this behind. Like I love eating chocolate cake. I'm going to eat 20 chocolate cakes because I love it so much. And I'm going to be really happy. That's, there's just these kind of simple impulse control. So anyways, with music, so you have promotion of, again, you have things that are actually done. There's things that are done for occult purposes, for sure. There's things that are done to promote certain types of social movements. There's things that are done to affect relationship between generations. Look at rock and roll. So rock and roll is our first example. We'll do very specific, concrete, coin right here in Cleveland. So, I live here, in Ohio. So, and by the way, if I'm talking too fast, tell me. I'm just trying to cram it all in. Like, you guys can watch this at half speed. But so Alan Freed was a DJ, right? Alan Freed here in Cleveland, Ohio, where the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame is there. So, and it's actually a very cool museum for sure. I mean, if you're ever in the United States, or if you live here, check out the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Very, very interesting thing. But so he coined the term rock and roll. Now, what was rock and roll? So, sorry, I won't narrow. I'm trying to say narrow because I can keep going back forwards and backwards in time. So I'm just going to go very direct. Rock and roll was basically a form of blues called jump blues. Okay. Which was 99%, among, African-American black audience, whatever. So Alan Freed started playing this music on a radio station that went out to the youth of the middle class. And they would do it, and there was some controversy, but he coined the term rock and roll. Okay, rock and roll, which basically means I think we can all rock and roll. I think we can all imagine sex, right? Rocking and rolling, or that was the original. It was a euphemism, going, for let's have some rock and roll tonight, whatever. So these rhythms, you have to imagine that these rhythms had a profound, look at Elvis, right? The controversy with Elvis. I mean, these rhythms had a profound effect. I mean, they just, we're really very dull sensorially, right? We have so much stimulation, so much media, this and that, right? Going back to the Greeks, there's nothing, no electronic. It's just either live or it doesn't exist. Then you go recordings, radio, and now inundation. But rock and roll, this was a radically different beat. I mean, people went hysterical. They freaked out. They went into complete trance. Look at, you can see the footage of like when the Beatles landed in 1963. The girls are just, they're going completely nuts. Waiting for that to happen to me. Hasn't happened yet. I told my wife, I said, they're coming after me. I gotta go. She's like, I don't believe you. No, it's happening. Like they're tearing, I'm tearing my clothes, still waiting. Maybe it's my name. That's the problem. But anyways, so this rock and roll, right, was introduced again, Alan Freed, you can look and find some other players behind them. Okay. You can find some of these pivotal points, but you also have film which used music. So what you also have is Pat Boone, Bill Haley. These were white artists, right? That were brought in specifically to take these jump R&B songs, right? So it was a blues thing. It kind of came out of Chicago blues, a little bit of Detroit. It's kind of like, it was much more up tempo, right? You know what I mean? So it wasn't like doo da da. It was like doo dick 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 doo da da. Kind of upbeat, but it was a little bit too raw. So Pat Boone, Bill Haley, literally, and I've done analysis. They came in, took out made the chords a little more smooth. Let's slow it down. Let's modulate that shuffle. Doom da da doom da da. So that beat has a powerful effect, or used to, right? I mean, you feel it in your, in your root chakra, let's say, yeah. Yeah. I mean, so they made sort of a white version, they made it more palatable, but then the huge thing. But you have several films, but Blackboard Jungle being the most important, because Blackboard Jungle was the first film that is what really gave rock and roll access to the entire United States. Okay. It featured Rock Around the Clock, which was a song Bill Haley had taken from, our black R&B jump group, cleaned it up a bit, smoothed it out, kept some of the pizzazz, but you know what I mean? Whatever, made the product. It was used in this movie, and I believe it was a young Marlon Brando, about juvenile delinquency, about, the students, this is early 50s, students attacking the teachers, students running away from home, disrespecting the parents, stuff like that. this was a big, thing, right? So this very popular movie, but this movie was the showcase for Rock Around the Clock. You know that song? You're not American.
Yeah, I know it. Yeah. Sure. Of course, yeah. I do.
You want to sing the first part?
Din 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 din. Is it?
1, 2, 3, 4, 4 o'clock rock. 5, 6, 7 o'clock, 8 o'clock rock. 9, 10, 11, 12 o'clock rock.
Yeah.
Rock around. Yeah.
Okay.
So, but anyways, but that was like the mainstream thing. So, but you have it associated with this film and this whole thing of juvenile delinquency. You have these archetypes being promoted, right? You can see a very distinct shift between the, like the cowboy type of hero, the John Wayne, like the gentleman, maybe he's sort of a loner, but he's like this heroic guy, man of few words, man of action, but has a big heart.
And when you say promoted, what's that intentional? I know that that in the other videos, interviews, you make the reference to MK Ultra. So is there a connection that actually intentionally was promoted?
Well, I'm going like sort of pre MK Ultra, but the rock movement, to say like, so this was a radical shift of the culture. Okay. It created a generation gap that didn't exist before. It was promoted also to children. Okay. It was promoted to teenagers. It was even the preteens, the tweens, you know what I mean? And so also one thing you start to notice is these gaps, or where certain music styles hit a roadblock. You have that with the early jazz, big band era. Oh, during World War II, suddenly, you're not allowed to take buses. It's illegal to go on tour. The whole thing with the big bands, they would drive all over the country. A lot of the, sort of, second tier rock clubs are these old dance halls that were all around the United States. So the war effort, it became, so suddenly that got shut down. Then you have rock and roll right after that. That got shut down hard. 1959, you've got Elvis, whatever. Elvis is drafted. You got Jerry Lee Lewis going to jail. You've got, plane crash. You have multiple deaths. You have like deaths in England. You have, that song American Pie. That's about the plane crash. Killed Buddy Holly, killed all the real gems, like Buddy Holly is a very talented artist. So, again, we can't, there's, your Buddy Holly's a great, that's what I'm saying. Like some of these directions, you look at some of these great groups or artists, like, Buddy Holly, etc. Like what, maybe music would have gone in. Why did these people die right at that point? Elvis, Chuck Berry, you have all these sexual scandals, you have, and deaths. Veen Jensen, mysterious motorcycle accident right at the same time. So rock is just gone. Poof. And what you have is about 3 years until right after the JFK assassination, you have either children's novelty songs, like kids, like, I'm a tiny bubble, and, songs literally for like, you think of like, Teletubbies or Cabbage Patch Kids. And then you have extremely sappy, sentimental, like super cheese, right? Very, very cheesy, easy listening. Think of like Lawrence Welk, like that. Pat Boone, et cetera, and there was but it was sort of like a null space. Kind of, there really wasn't anything. This whole youth movement, it just stopped. It was like hitting a brick wall. Literally. And it did hit a brick wall. And the music was, people weren't going back. It wasn't retro era, right? This stuff just died out, right? When this was brought back in the some of this stuff was brought back even in the Sha Na Na, right? They brought this back. That was a group. It did 1950s music. Okay. Anyways, sorry, that wasn't, Herr Hans. I hit the microphone. I'm not now. But, so, these are like huge topics. I'm also hitting the consciousness stuff, but just to say, so, but at the same time, was there a massive change? Yes. And I mentioned what I'm trying to do is correlate this with other things that were happening, such as the move away from the hero, who's like the warrior, the king, whatever, to the rebel who is not even really a hero. He's an anti-hero, right? Rebel without a cause. F you. I'm going to do whatever I want. I'm going to get super petulant and emotional and freak out and just enjoy myself or just destroy things because it shows that I'm powerful and because I hate you, mom and dad. Literally, this stuff was and created a very sharp divide. But the Beatles is the next level. And that's, we have, of course, MK Ultra stuff going earlier. And then just to...
Do you want to expand your awareness beyond linear, restrictive, self-limiting thinking and rational knowledge and uncover your hidden treasures? Then join our next free webinar and unlock greater fulfillment and accelerate your empowerment. I've supported hundreds of people to free their minds from wrong knowledge and false beliefs, such as the fear of failure, and really have more success naturally. Sign up now to open this possibility for you. Hans, you just touched upon the transition from rock and roll to the Beatles. And
yeah, so the so quote unquote British invasion, which some people correlate with sort of the Tavistock Institute, and which is a research organization, and you have Chatham House, things like that. These are some of sort of the source points people sometimes cite for the stuff. But anyways, so you have these big shifts in. So I'm speaking specifically, of course, about America, since even though I've got German blood, I'm totally American. So, but I love sauerkraut. I don't know if that counts. but so the JFK. But one thing just to state, though, I mean, American music has influenced the entire planet.
Right? It is, yeah.
So even the British invasion was what? It was American music being sold back to Americans, right? I mean, ultimately that was music that came. They took the 50s rock and they brought it back. That's what they were doing. They listened to all the 50s music and stuff like that. But anyways, so the new sort of dawn of rock also coincided with what? What happened in 1963?
Psychedelics?
JFK assassination.
Okay, yeah, okay.
So that was a major event. Think about that. Major collective traumatic event going on. So, we go forward, again, so I want to stress that there's different capacities, right? And again, there's lots of things available, right? So we have all our different senses. There's lots of great music. There's lots of, music has a tremendous potentiality to increase intelligence, to increase well-being, to be able to access your own emotional states and be able to go through them and release them to integrate or transcend or whatever. So, and we can go you can go to spiritual side. You can go, of course, spiritual is what? It's just another way of framing types of energy, right? So you could say I'm a materialist, but what does matter, right? What does matter? Of course.
Perception.
Okay, go ahead. Yeah.
I would say it's a perception.
It is a
energy.
relational quality. So look at a laser, right? Is this wall? If there's a weaponized laser, if I touch this wall, it's matter. If the laser will go pass right through it, right? I mean, a different medium, but a perception. Everything ultimately it arises in the field of consciousness, but. It's very important to balance inner, outer, and see the connection of these things and to develop clarity. Clarity, to know what is actually happening in you or to know when you don't want to know. You don't need to, how many things, if you create a problem, like depression, you know what I mean? And I hate, saying that, like, I'm depressed. Well, you just labeled yourself You just created a narrative for your life. You've created a definition you're going to carry across to from this situation to that situation. Okay, what does it mean? It means this. Well, okay, but what's this? I have what? Oh, you have decreased heart rate, appetite. I don't feel like doing anything. Well, what if you do something? What if you just, instead of saying, I'm depressed, just go outside and do something? Maybe you're not depressed anymore. But I'm saying you generate a state or a problem. But so a lot of this within the music, what you have, again, you have the neurophysiological examples. I'll give one example of that. You have example of sexual mores, of free love as opposed to having a stable relationship, right? You have the birth control pill right at the same time, right? Birth control pill, sex without consequences. That's a big thing. You have promotion of you become who you are by destroying everything your parents are evil, basically. The man, my parents, I hate my parents. Some people have really bad parents. A lot of times some people have great parents, but the main thing is that you have to integrate and move beyond it. At a certain point, it has to become your circumstances, not your prison. How many people I know still talk about what their mom did to them when they were, 10 years old, and they're like 40? I mean, you know what I mean? Heal the damage, go into healing, but don't create something outside yourself that doesn't exist because it's imagination. It's a memory. You're not in that situation now. That situation is gone. It's gone forever. It exists as a mental representation. Okay. But anyway, so that's one of the things though with sort of the negative or counter effects of music is, I mentioned music has an ability, allows you access to inner states that are normally not accessible. You're able to go beyond sort of the conceptual thought just based. You can go to an embodied somatic experiential. You're able to feel a parallel resonance. There's like songs of great grief. If you have a tragedy in your life and, there's an expression of that, it creates a resonance and may even guide you to a type of healing, right? But also, as I mentioned, cognitive functioning, impulse control, sensory acuity, et cetera, et cetera. These are all positive attributes of music, as are the opposite of all those things, right? No impulse control. Not being able to access your own emotions clearly. And then also this overstimulation. So example one I mentioned was going to be the overstimulation. So even going back, there's, this stuff of course has been dismissed as garbage, but there are people studying how the Beatles were using technologies and techniques developed by Pavlov, developed by Luria, right? Developed testing on animals and small children in the Soviet Union to create a type of mental instability. Pavlov was a physiologist, so a lot of these were the physiology, right? I mean, stay in the heart. The brain is good, but your heart is where it's at, I think. But the heart is your consciousness, right? Anyways, so what they looked at was using, you get this, the parasympathetic, they call the arousal and inhibitory nervous systems, both going at the same time, creating a sort of like a gridlock. This is from, say, this can be done through actual beats, through the physiological properties.
Through the music?
Through music. Now, the music, of course, this takes a type of conditioning, it goes over time. This was done. You have like types of rhythms, you have like contrasting, metronomes, things like that. So this was studied with the metronome was found the best way to mark the conditioning, the time, the beat, right? So, what would happen is that you get this, one of the studies was like the dog This is not the bell, right? This is where the dog, he sees like a golden circle. There's a beat. Tack, 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 tack. He gets a treat. Tack, he goes back. There's a golden oval. The beat's a little different. He gets a treat. Then they start playing. There's a golden circle, same beat, no treat. Same beat, this, that. Literally made the dogs completely insane because you're continually moving, but you're juxtaposing these different things. But on sort of the, like say, for example, the Beatles, at least some of the research people did at the time, talked about how using this Pavlovian Lurian research, you have these neurophysiological processes, nothing to do with even what the music is, right? It just, this is some effect that's happening on the body, right?
But are you saying they incorporated that in their music or on stage through sound systems or?
Well, this case, you're looking at, this is not my argument. I'm just giving you an example. So,
okay.
But this, according to there was books written on this, back in it's always good to go back to some of the counter movements at the time, right? Before the hagiography is installed. Hagiography means biography of saints, right? But anyway, so basically they correlated this with the research of, there's like 4 or 5 different, I can get the actual sources, but there's a number of psychologists, scientists that researched and analyzed this, at the time this was happening, say 65, 66, et cetera. But, so that's there, use of rhythmic type of stimulation, certain types of movements, melodic movements, mass hysteria was a huge part of it. Okay. Mass hysteria. You have these collective things, the concerts. I mean, you've seen the recordings of the Beatles. You can't even hear them in a whole stadium. That's how loud the women are screaming, right? This is a collective mass induction, entrainment. But then also the promotion. So it's hard to remember. There used to be, like, at least in America, we have traditional values, right? A certain type of traditional value structure. You're going against that. Go and have sex. I want to have sex with John Lennon, these girls, stripping nude sometimes. I mean, literally, but they're almost, it's like a deep-seated conflict, especially say, type of very religious Catholic upbringing or something. I mean, you're almost, So you're creating these type of psychic splits, and then also types of like wild movements, self-control, lack of control, And you're running these two systems at the same time, and you're just creating an overload. Then you get a shutdown. Then you do feel peace. There's a lot of some types of meditation techniques, or certain things do this exact same thing. So you're creating a lot of tension, right? And then you're almost overloading your system. And then you feel relaxed for like 10 minutes, but you've just driven your traumas and stuff far deeper in your psyche, far deeper in your nervous system, and made them more inaccessible because now you have this particular technique. Anyway, so that's the example with the Beatles. Fast forward, so when we go into the psychedelic rock, we have actual, direct connection, Grateful Dead, doing experimentation. You have all these guys, they're all ex-military, man. They're all Jerry Garcia, top secret military clearance, working on nuclear missile base. Suddenly just gets kicked out of that and becomes like a folky guy with a beard playing a guitar. Grateful Dead getting press coverage before there were anything, right? They're getting press coverage. They're getting on local TV stations. Ken Kesey, wrote the book One Who Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. Ran the Merry Pranksters. Grateful Dead was a house band for the Merry Pranksters. You've got all these different, individuals who are running advanced level light sound neural entrainment systems, with multiple tape decks using types of delay that affects consciousness, huge lighting systems. This is the Merry Pranksters. Somebody there had a lot of, well, of course, Ken, these are ex-Marines, the Ken, and there's a number of them that were doing that. So this is where the Grateful Dead came out. The psychedelic era was born at that time. And the whole thing was the clothes, everything was just rolled out at one piece. It was rolled out and it was broadcast to the world. right? But it didn't organically develop. You know, if you look at some of the video from that era and you see like the types of clothing, you have this movement towards synthetic, very artificial types of jarring fabrics right after the JFK assassination as well, right? So so all these things are connected, right? But, with the Grateful Dead, okay, I'll slow down. I'm going to take a deep breath. So Ken Kesey was extremely important, right? Why was Ken Kesey important? College, like Jack Kerouac, right? Jack Kerouac, who wrote On the Road. Now, I won't go into that. That's a whole nother, countercultural thing.
Who is Ken Kesey?
So he was the guy. He was actually, the whole 1960s psychedelic movement would not have existed without him. He was the ringleader. But he wrote a book called One Who Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. Familiar with that book? Movie starring Nicholson?
Might have listened or seen it, but not present right now.
Well, so this was a very important film. Okay. He wrote he was, had military, was like, all-American athlete, wrote this novel, became international bestseller. They made a movie of it. Suddenly he started taking LSD and started this whole acid tests. So we're saying like, this is like the guy that could have run for president, right? Best and the brightest, good looking, fit, intellectual, whatever. So he started, after his military stint, he was taking LSD as part of experimentation at the Menlo Park facility. He was taking the LSD as being like a human guinea pig. All these players in the whole psychedelic movement met at that was also an MK Ultra site, Menlo Park. This was actually, it was literally an MK Ultra experiment. And so Ken Kesey, but what's really important is you have a psychologist, R.D. Laing, right? You have R.D. Laing and you have Kesey and you have many other people. So R.D. Laing's thing was that a schizophrenic is not insane. Society is insane. Schizophrenia and madness is enlightenment. We want to become insane. Schizophrenia is freedom. One Who Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. This is, you can look it up. Again, one of the, most popular American movies, etc. So in this movie, again, written when he was still sort of a guy wearing a suit and tie, right? In his, late 20s. Is that he goes in this, he's in a mental hospital. He works there. It turns out that the insane inmates are Hussein. The world outside is insane. But the whole thing, the divided self, R.D. Laing, who also did a lot of stuff with LSD, et cetera, is saying that this schizophrenic state, because LSD was known as what? As a schizophrenogen initially, before they came up with the term hallucinogen. In the research chemical, it's called a schizophrenogen, which means what? It can generate schizophrenia and psychosis. This was the name of the drug class. Anyways, so Ken Kesey, so this guy, if people aren't familiar, again, iconic movie starring Jack Nicholson's career, The Shining, etc. You can even see these actors who they lead people along these timelines, right? These actors show up. You've heard the movie Shining?
Yes, but also I couldn't.
Okay, well, so
share
The Shining is another.
Yeah.
So Jack Nicholson, again, like he was in these iconic movies. He was in like Easy Rider, 60s drug thing. But he was in the movie The Shining. Look up the clip. Here's Johnny. He's this writer, staying in this remote, resort, and he completely goes insane. And he knocks the door out and sticks his head. Here's Johnny, threatening his wife and kids. See Johnny Carson. Here's Johnny. Same time, right? Johnny Carson at the peak of his powers. But anyways, what I'm giving is sort of a called holotropic thinking, right? I'm giving different things. They'll fuse in, right? What I'm saying is these are different points. They all interconnect. It's not, so it's not that I'm non-linear. They all tie together. Anyways, Ken Kesey suddenly goes from being wonderkind, best-selling novelist, whatever, all-American athlete, to this friggin' LSD pushing freak that's rolling around. He goes all over the United States while LSD was still legal with the Grateful Dead, with the Merry Prankster, light and sound crew, because they have something called "Can You Pass the Acid Test?" Tom Wolfe, very famous writer who wrote All the Right Stuff about the astronaut program. He was like the new journalist, top journalist, wrote about Ken Kesey, the electric Kool-Aid acid test. It was mainstream literature, right? But the acid tests, people would go in there. They have, I've really incredibly disturbing things, crazy voices. You've got, echoes, delays, weird video footage, and people just people being completely permanently insane also at these things. And it was not like you're going in there to relax and meditate. You're going in there, flashing lights, this, that, while the Grateful Dead are jamming out. This was a psychedelic era. Pushed, foregrounded, and literally using exact MK Ultra techniques. That's what the electric Kool-Aid acid tests were. This was a friggin' MK Ultra. Ken Kesey, he saw the Beatles. They went on LSD, he saw the Beatles, and he saw that they said the Beatles turned the entire audience into one psychic organism that they controlled. This is behind all. So, and then we can go into Charles Manson and Marilyn Manson directly. I know lots of detail on this. I don't want to go too much detail. But that being said, so I gave kind of an overview. One of the things is that to this certain things, right? And I'm not saying, this is deliberate or not deliberate, but when you start to add up factors and other things, you can see that, this is not just a natural unfolding of history, of human energy. It's being steered, and it's steered at crucial juncture points. I'm not saying this is all there is. Of course not. But think about that, right? I mentioned these things of different directions people were going into. What was the whole hippie movement? You have this, like even my dad, right? He was at Berkeley in the 60s, and they had the anti-war movement. They were all respectable, law majors, this, that, and they're protesting the war. Suddenly you have all these people wearing beads, feather boas, tripping on an acid. All right, man, I'm seeing God. Yeah, it's just a big rainbow, man. Right, until you get shot, it's not a rainbow. But, or you get whatever, you know what I'm saying? So you have this disconnection, and then you have, what is this? I'm sorry to say, now, maybe some value in certain ritual contexts from psychedelic, expand your mind. I think that the mind can be expanded without you don't need to do these things, because the risk is that until you have this type of psychic integration, but also full mind body with the world also, and your place in the world, your responsibility, potentiality, your rest, at, I would say, full potential, but also with a graceful acceptance and some impulse to healing or beauty for others as a baseline. Then you're clear. But it's very easy. But other things is these things can split your own mind, right? We can go into use of music then we look at possession being done to audiences collectively. Now we're going, last thing we talk about 70s, some of these things where they're doing types of possession things for the collective audience. They're invoking, now, what do you want to say? These are living entities? Are these collective psychic forces? Are these, certain properties, potential states? So all these, right? You have all these things happen, and you can see, I think the fruit is the life, how it's unfolding, right? And many people, they get stuck in certain places, or, some of these inputs can be very small, but they can affect someone for the rest of their life if they don't clear it. You know what I'm saying? So some of this, the negative impulse of music, look at hip hop, right? Hip hop with gangster rap, crack epidemic. I was, there when they had this very positive mindfulness rap stuff. Suddenly you have this violent gangster rap, massive social cultural transformation. crack, drug, gangster rap, etc. This is not debatable. It happened, right? It was, and there in this you can see very specific decisions made at very key nodal points of executive structures. So,
yeah, Hans, this is great, yeah. But I think we are scratching the 2-hour mark. Maybe we can come together for a second conversation and go into a bit more detail about the social transformation through music / drugs, and look into this into a little bit more detail.
Yeah, for sure. No, I want to. I should have probably gotten more information about you. I didn't.
Yeah, no problem.
Talk it all, man.
No. This is all good. Yeah.
But I'm really, I think, and maybe you can think of this like, so consciousness really is, it's the key, because everything ultimately, at least for us, right, exists only in consciousness. Yet, how this is defined, because I think that the human organism, the human mind, your life, your goals, your ambitions, your relationships, all this can flow and manifest in perfect harmony with, once some of these things, you just remove these types of resonance and learn certain things that, things can be subtle and they can shift you, right? You know what I'm saying? And so whatever you focus your attention on is going to become more real. It's going to become material. Right? So I think just be careful what you focus your consciousness on, but then also, I think that in a certain way music reflects this magical connection we have with all the energies in the universe, potentially, right? And so, anyways, leave it there.
Yeah, there would be so much more to explore and also ask you. I propose we continue in another conversation.
Sounds great. Hansutter.com, my website. I've got a few shows that I think I'm doing a few this week also. But I've started my own radio show. I had 3 cancellations. But that's a little obstacle.
We will link it in the description.
We'll do that.
Your website.
And, Simon, it was awesome. Thank you so much for having me on, man. I really appreciate it.
Likewise. Yeah. Thanks for accepting the invitation. The audience, if you enjoyed this interview, please share it widely, subscribe to our channel, and most importantly, stay true to yourself, and see you next time.